And if we're nervous or upset about anything, he's the perfect person to be there with you.
And if we're nervous or upset about anything, he's the perfect person to be there with you. They smiled on screen. They mended broken heirlooms. They brought families to tears with every restoration. The warmth of the workshop was unmistakable. But behind those smiles, the Fletchers carried secrets no one could see. Suzie and Steve Fletcher, the beloved siblings of the repair shop, became household names through their dedication, skill, and gentle presence. Yet the public only saw the tip of the iceberg. Beneath the carefully polished wood and gleaming metal lay stories of pain, endurance, and battles fought quietly, away from the cameras. For over a decade, millions found comfort in the soothing rhythm of the workshop, the soft scrape of sandpaper, the rhythmic ticking of clocks, and the quiet triumph of repairing cherished possessions. Central to this sanctuary of calm were Suzie and Steve, two souls whose hands seemed touched by a rare kind of magic. Suzie, delicate yet strong, embodied patience and care. Steve, meticulous and calm, balanced her energy with steadiness. Together, they were the anchors of a world steeped in nostalgia and memory. To the audience, they weren't just artisans, they were family. Symbols of enduring strength, loyalty, and heritage. But the perfect on-screen chemistry masked an unseen story, one stitched with pain and silence. The fans sensed something beneath the surface. A flicker of sadness in Suzie's eyes when a piece reminded her of lost moments. A brief hesitation in Steve's hands when a topic drifted too close to home. These subtle nuances hinted at a hidden chapter. Suzie Fletcher's life was more than the graceful exterior portrayed on screen. Raised in the rugged beauty of Colorado's sprawling ranchlands, she learned early the meaning of hard work, responsibility, and silent endurance. Life's lessons came harsh and unrelenting. Her marriage, initially full of promise, became a source of hidden pain. The man she loved became a figure of control and abuse, leaving scars she seldom spoke of. Despite this, Suzie transformed her suffering into purpose. Every heirloom she restored became an act of silent resilience, each stitch or polish a quiet reclaiming of strength. Yet beneath her calm exterior, invisible scars remained, known intimately only to her and Steve. Steve Fletcher, the quiet guardian, carried his own weight. Behind the rhythmic ticking of clocks was a man protecting both his sister and the legacy of the workshop. His calm demeanor masked struggles, sacrifices, and nights spent wrestling with memories too painful to voice. Together, they presented a united front, a shared bond forged in survival and loyalty. Their childhood home in Oxfordshire was a world of contrasts. On the surface, it was charmingly ramshackle, filled with creaky floors, faded wallpaper, and the bustling presence of 4 lively children. Family meals, birthday celebrations, and laughter created an image of warmth and togetherness. But beneath this facade lurked shadows. Their mother suffered from severe postnatal depression, a condition misunderstood and ignored in her time. Their father, struggling under the weight of his own fears, eventually faced a nervous breakdown. The home that seemed full of life was often pierced by silent suffering. Steve reflected on those early years with honesty. Our mom suffered dreadfully. It wasn't just sadness, it was isolation. And that pushed Dad over the edge. He couldn't cope. Suzie added, looking back, I feel sorrow for her. Nobody understood what she endured. Yet amidst the hardship, the siblings found solace in each other. Their resilience was quiet but formidable, a testament to the determination of a family seeking healing, however imperfectly. As Suzie entered her 30s, she made a bold decision, to leave Oxfordshire for Colorado. To the outside world, it was an adventure, a fresh start. But for Suzie, it was also an escape. Colorado's open landscapes offered space to breathe and distance from old ghosts. There, she married Rob, a man whose love would ultimately transform into hidden terror. The marriage, largely absent from public view, concealed a journey marked by control, violence, and resilience. Suzie's experience became a private crucible, shaping the woman audiences would later admire for strength and compassion. Meanwhile, Steve remained in Oxfordshire, tending the workshop and raising his family. His life, like Suzie's, was governed by an unspoken pact of silence, a survival strategy born of generations that avoided exposing vulnerability. Steve Fletcher's public persona reflected precision, calm, and expertise. Yet beneath the surface lay decades of hidden responsibility. His quiet nature was less about temperament and more about guarding a family secret. Every smile caught on camera was carefully curated to shield the raw truth beneath. Suzie understood the cost of exposure all too well. "We were forced to hide this," she said. Families didn't share back then. Silence was survival. In a generation where mental health was taboo, and vulnerability was viewed as weakness, the Fletchers created a fortress of discretion. Pain was concealed not out of shame, but necessity. Their bond became the language of resilience, communicated through glances, gestures, and shared understanding. Steve's steadfastness mirrored endurance. Though the public saw a craftsman repairing objects, behind closed doors he mended hearts, his sisters', his own, and the legacy of a fractured family. Time, like all mechanisms, reveals imperfections. Slowly, the carefully maintained facade began to crack. Suzie's absences from episodes became noticeable. Steve grew more reflective in interviews, hinting at stories hidden beneath layers of polish. Fans sensed these shifts. They realized that the Fletchers' public warmth masked private battles. The collective silence became less of a wall and more a plea for empathy and understanding. The narrative of perfect restorers began to reveal itself as a human story of survival, endurance, and unwavering loyalty. The anticipation grew. When the reveal came, it would not be about scandals, it would be about courage, vulnerability, and the strength of finally speaking the unspoken. The decision to share their story was not sudden. It evolved slowly, a decades-long negotiation with themselves and their past. For years, Steve and Suzie carried their shared history quietly. The world saw their smiles, their craft, and their passion. But they knew pain doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it lurks in calm eyes, in measured words, waiting to be acknowledged. Finally, a podcast interview became the medium for their release. Steve spoke first. "When you grow up with that kind of background, you carry it quietly. But eventually, you have to let it go. You can't keep it inside forever, it eats at you." It wasn't a plea for attention, it was a reclaiming of self. Their vulnerability marked a turning point, a quiet revolution of truth and healing. Even with their breakthrough, much remained in shadow. Suzie and Steve revealed only fragments of a deeper, darker story. Suzie's marriage to Rob, largely hidden from the public, had been harrowing. Though Rob battled pancreatic cancer, the illness revealed a transformation into a controlling, violent figure. The darkest memory Suzie shared was terrifying, being lifted by her throat, feet dangling as she struggled to breathe. "I honestly thought I was going to die," she confessed. Her words, barely above a whisper, shattered illusions and revealed a truth the audience had never imagined. The transformation of someone she loved into a threat deepened the pain she had carried for years. Yet, amidst this horror, Suzie's strength emerged. Speaking her truth became liberation. Silence had been captivity. Sharing became freedom. For years, millions watched Suzie and Steve restore heirlooms. The polished leather, gleaming metal, and precise stitching were admired. But these objects were mirrors of their own journeys. Behind the scenes, they were survivors. They carried invisible scars from childhood, trauma, and silence. The laughter over restored clocks masked nights of wrestling with memories. Each project was a symbol of resilience and hope. Steve once admitted, "We didn't just fix things for others. As we restored these treasures, we found pieces of ourselves." Suzie agreed, "Every stitch I made wasn't just about leather, it was about putting myself back together." Their bond became a lifeline. Together, they repaired not just objects, but themselves, embodying hope, healing, and the power of resilience. When Suzie and Steve finally opened their private world, the effect was profound. Fans glimpsed the raw humanity behind the restoration benches. They learned of childhood abuse, mental health battles, and generational trauma. Yet through it all, the Fletchers chose kindness. They restored not only objects but also hope. Their work became a testament to human resilience, a lesson that even in darkness, healing is possible. Suzie's revelation, decades of hidden pain, was the heart of the story. It was not only survival but a call to courage, to break silence, embrace vulnerability, and recognize the strength in imperfection. For the first time, they weren't just preserving history, they were reclaiming their own. Piece by piece, stitch by stitch, Suzie and Steve rebuilt their identities alongside the heirlooms they restored. Their story is a reminder: healing is an act of creation. Restoration is not just physical, it is emotional, spiritual, and profoundly human. Suzie and Steve Fletcher taught the world that even in brokenness, there is potential for beauty. Even in silence, there is strength. And even in pain, there is hope. What truth have you kept hidden for too long? What would it take to finally let it out? The Fletcher's story reminds us that courage is found not in perfection, but in honesty. Healing is messy. Healing is slow. But it is possible. Piece by piece, stitch by stitch, we can restore not only what has been broken, but ourselves. Thank you for watching this video. Share your thoughts in the comments, and join us as we continue to explore stories of resilience, courage, and the human spirit. The workshop wasn't just a place of work, it was a sanctuary. Each beam of light that fell across worn workbenches carried memories of resilience. The smell of leather, the polished wood, and the faint tang of metal were more than sensory details, they were markers of survival. For Suzie and Steve, the workshop became a world where control could be reclaimed. Broken objects came in, and they left whole. Every restored heirloom was a symbol of their determination to fix what was broken, not just outside, but within themselves. The rhythm of work, the scraping, sanding, stitching, polishing, was meditative, a balm for invisible scars. Fans often commented on the soothing pace of their shows, not realizing that the calm they enjoyed on screen mirrored the quiet strength required behind the scenes. Each clock ticked not just for time, but for healing. Suzie often said that each broken item held a story, sometimes more vivid than any human memory. A cracked saddle, a dented silver tray, a shattered watch, they were reminders that life itself is fragile, yet reparable. Steve added, every piece we fix is a lesson. It teaches patience, care, and humility. And sometimes, it teaches us about ourselves. Through their work, they learned that restoration is an act of empathy. They didn't just fix objects, they honored the lives attached to them, the memories embedded in every scratch and dent. It became a language of understanding trauma, patience, and quiet persistence. In private, Suzie and Steve often revisited memories they'd long hidden. They spoke in whispers, in silences, in small gestures. The unspoken understanding between them became a lifeline. Suzie once confided, we could never undo what happened. But we could face it together, and that made all the difference. They confronted childhood wounds, adult betrayals, and decades of silence not by dramatics, but through the simple act of being present for each other. Together, they learned that courage wasn't in hiding pain, it was in acknowledging it. Even after sharing their story publicly, the struggle continued. Interviews, fan interactions, and social media offered validation but also reopened old wounds. Every question about their lives brought back fragments of the past. Yet, Suzie and Steve navigated this new reality with grace. They allowed themselves to be vulnerable while setting boundaries, understanding that healing doesn't mean reliving trauma, it means learning to live fully despite it. Fans now saw them differently. No longer just restorers of objects, they were restorers of hope. Their transparency inspired others to confront their own hidden battles and to find strength in shared vulnerability. One of the most profound lessons Suzie and Steve learned was that trauma doesn't have to define the next generation. Through careful choices, empathy, and open communication, they worked to prevent the shadows of the past from touching their own children, nieces, and nephews. Steve emphasized, we can't change the past, but we can change the future. That's where hope lives, in the hands we raise, the hearts we nurture, the stories we tell differently. Their work in the workshop became symbolic of this generational healing. Every repaired object, every story they shared, became a bridge between what was broken and what could be rebuilt. By now, it was clear that Suzie and Steve's influence stretched far beyond their craft. Their legacy was not just in restored heirlooms, but in the lessons they imparted: resilience, empathy, patience, and courage. The workshop taught the world that strength is not loud or aggressive, it can be quiet, persistent, and deeply human. Their story reminded viewers that heroism exists in daily acts of care, in facing personal demons, and in refusing to let pain define one's life. The most profound moment in their journey wasn't a restored antique, it was the first time Suzie spoke publicly about her experiences. Vulnerability became a tool, a weapon, a path to liberation. "I realized silence was a cage," Suzie said. "Speaking out didn't erase the pain, but it freed me from carrying it alone." Steve supported her fully, understanding that shared experiences become lighter when they are acknowledged. Their example demonstrated that talking about trauma doesn't weaken a person, it strengthens them, and those around them. Their craft remained central to their emotional journey. Each restoration project was more than a job, it was therapy, a meditation, a language of healing. Suzie's delicate stitching, Steve's careful clockwork repairs, their shared attention to detail, it was a dance of repair, patience, and quiet reflection. Every object mended became a mirror of their own restoration, a reminder that broken things can be beautiful once rebuilt. When their story emerged, the response was overwhelming. Fans who had adored them for their skill suddenly understood the depth of their courage. Messages poured in: gratitude, empathy, stories of viewers inspired to confront their own challenges. The Fletchers became symbols not just of restoration, but of resilience and hope. Their influence transcended television, it reached hearts, reminding people everywhere that it is possible to rebuild oneself, even after unimaginable struggles. Now, Suzie and Steve look forward, not backward. They continue to restore cherished objects, but also focus on teaching, mentoring, and sharing their wisdom. Their journey reminds us all, restoration is not just for antiques, it is for the soul. And through their story, the Fletchers show that no matter how heavy the past, courage, love, and resilience can shape a future filled with hope. For Suzie and Steve, the workshop was more than a place of work, it was a teacher. Every object that came across their hands held lessons about patience, care, and resilience. The tools they used were extensions of themselves: hammers, needles, brushes, and polishing cloths became instruments of understanding and restoration. Each restoration project mirrored life's challenges. A shattered clock taught the precision required to rebuild, a frayed leather strap reminded them that endurance is built gradually, and a tarnished silver tray showed that beauty often lies beneath the surface. In restoring objects, they found a path to restore their own lives. The daily rhythm of the workshop became a lifeline. Morning coffee at the bench, the sound of sandpaper against wood, the careful polishing of metal, these routines offered stability in a life once marked by chaos. Suzie often reflected, routine doesn't just structure the day, it steadies the heart. Steve agreed, noting that consistency provided a framework for healing. Even when old memories threatened to resurface, the predictability of their craft grounded them, creating a space where pain could be acknowledged without being overwhelming. As their story gained visibility, Suzie and Steve realized their journey could inspire others. They began mentoring young artisans, teaching not only skills but also the subtle lessons of resilience, patience, and empathy. Young people don't just need to learn technique, Steve said. They need to understand the heart behind the craft, the importance of care and thoughtfulness. Suzie added that teaching became a form of healing. By helping others, they reinforced their own strength and reaffirmed the value of surviving hardships with grace. The decision to share their story with the public was deliberate, courageous, and transformative. Fans who had once only admired them for craftsmanship suddenly connected on a deeper, human level. The vulnerability they displayed wasn't about seeking sympathy, it was about honesty. "We wanted people to know that struggles can exist behind smiles," Suzie said. "And that it's possible to keep going, even when the past feels unbearable." This honesty resonated globally, inspiring viewers to confront their own hidden battles and to seek healing rather than concealment. Pain, they realized, is not a curse but a teacher. Every wound, physical, emotional, or psychological, offered an opportunity to learn patience, empathy, and endurance. Steve reflected, "We can't control what happens to us, but we can control how we respond. And how we respond defines the legacy we leave." Suzie agreed, noting that trauma doesn't have to limit potential, it can be transformed into strength and purpose. Their work became a living metaphor. Just as broken objects can be restored to beauty, human hearts can be repaired, too. The bond between Suzie and Steve was central to their survival. They often reminded each other that healing is not solitary, it is shared. From quiet conversations late at night to collaborative work on delicate projects, they supported each other emotionally and practically. Steve said, "We survived because we had each other. Alone, it would have been unbearable. Together, we made sense of the chaos." This lesson of interconnected resilience became one of the most profound takeaways from their story. Their craft transcended skill, it became therapy. Each meticulous repair, every careful restoration, allowed them to process complex emotions. A frayed leather strap was stitched with precision, reflecting the care they gave to their own hearts. A dented clock was realigned with focus, mirroring the recalibration of their lives. Suzie described this process as meditative. "When I'm restoring something, I feel like I'm restoring pieces of myself too." Steve added that the physical act of repair grounded them in the present, transforming anxiety and fear into calm purpose. For decades, silence had protected them. But transforming that silence into voice became the next stage of their journey. By sharing their story, they reclaimed power over their past. Speaking about trauma, abuse, and generational challenges was not easy, but it was liberating. It allowed them to step out of the shadows of fear and into a narrative of empowerment. Suzie emphasized, "Silence protects in one way, but it confines in another. Speaking frees you, it changes your relationship with your past and your future." While their skill restored objects, their story restored hope. The lessons they imparted transcended craft, touching every person who watched or learned from them. Their legacy is a combination of artistry and courage. It is the knowledge that resilience, empathy, and vulnerability are as important as any tool in the workshop. Every heirloom repaired became a symbol of possibility, a reminder that what is broken can be made whole. Suzie and Steve's story is not only theirs, it is a message to anyone carrying invisible burdens. They teach that it is possible to survive, to rebuild, and to find meaning in both struggle and recovery. Their lives prove that the greatest restoration is not in objects, but in ourselves. Every stitch, every polish, every carefully restored heirloom carries the echo of courage, patience, and the triumph of the human spirit. While the world often focuses on dramatic revelations, Suzie and Steve taught that healing lives in the small, quiet moments. A gentle conversation over a restored clock. A shared laugh as leather stitching went slightly askew. A hand placed on a shoulder when words weren't enough. These tiny gestures became a lifeline, a subtle language of care and understanding. They reminded each other, and everyone watching, that strength doesn't always